In this video, I want to talk to you about a really quick way to use backgrounds to build your repertoire of props and scenes or ideas that you have in your mind. Children's books, which I have mentioned before, and not just copying them, but actually tracing from them. So you'll remember when we traced in earlier courses, what we're looking at is just finding the main components of a scene. So not necessarily every single little detail, but if we reduce the opacity of our scene, so kind of adjust it down so it's a bit pale so we don't see everything perfectly, and then we just pick up the main parts. And of course, what we want to do is to see where the overlapping is, because that's what gives us the ground. So we've got this basket which overlaps with the table leg behind here and that foot. We've got the table here which overlaps with this piece of furniture in the background. We can see that this little meerkat's head overlaps with the pencil frame, the picture frame in the background there. And this little lamb's head could overlap with the windowsill. If it was a little bit higher, then we'd have even more overlapping. The one thing that you don't see here, which I've spoken about before, it's implied here, but I think it should actually be in there, is the ground line. So under here, there would be a ground line kind of behind where the legs of that table are, maybe right behind them like that, because you'd probably have a skirting board or something. So what I can do is just erase so that I'm not actually drawing through the legs of all these things like that. So we just got an impression of where the floor meets the wall behind there. And now I'm going to go and do my tracing. So the first thing that we're going to do is just very roughly getting the details of the basket like this and like that. We could put a ball of wool in front of the basket overlapping like this if we wanted to. Then we've got even more overlapping going on. And then we can take the table like this. And when you, especially as you start working with interior scenes, it is a good idea to do some of this tracing. I always recommend tracing. It's just faster, it builds skill, and you don't have to think so hard because it really does build muscle memory and visual memory for you. So this, as you start working with perspective, the tracing really helps, and you don't need to get into all the detail. So we've got our little characters here. We can look at this chair with a couple of legs like that. I can look at his face like this. Ears on each side and this little. So what I'm looking at is which elements are overlapping here. And what I would do is actually make this little head a little bit higher like that so that it overlaps with the windowsill behind. And then we've got all our grounds overlapping and overlapping and overlapping, which is the main thing. So as long as you've got the overlapping, you're all good. And if we have this little elephant coming in here on the side, you can see that his paws are overlapping on each side of its ball of wool. So that's also working for us. And coming in from a different part of the room. So this is the fastest way to not get, to keep the joy actually in your copying of backgrounds and not get too freaked out about the different details. A little bit more on tracing. I just wanted to show you these couple of frames that I took out of Asterix, and you can see how they use the kind of four middle background principles going on quite nicely. So here we've got foreground. I don't even know what that is. It might be a page number, but we've got him in the extreme foreground. We've got this kind of the ground line quite clearly. We've got the different overlapping sets of bushes. So let's go in and do a little bit of tracing with those two. So I'm going to just adjust their opacity, and here we go. Okay, so the first thing in here is the ground line. So that's great. And we've got, I like the way his feet, do you see they're at a slight angle? Immediately gives us a bit of attitude. So don't forget about putting a bit of an angle for the feet. So we've got his watering can, and look how beautifully they overlap. The watering can overlaps the ground line as well. So we can see that it's definitely in the foreground here. We've got his feet at the angle. We've got these just few little hints of longer grass closer, getting a little bit smaller as it goes further away, and then just going completely blank, an indication that there's less detail because it's further away. And then we've got these overlapping bushes. So we've got the tallest bush up the back there, and we've got these overlapping things to give us different levels of bushes. There is cloud in the sky and stuff. We ignore whatever's above that. So just in terms of your tracing, getting in the ground line like that, making sure you've got some overlapping bushes, taller grass at the front, slightly shorter grass behind him, character in there, nice overlap between foreground and middle ground. He has pretty detailed backgrounds in Asterix and Obelix, but these are the sort of ones that you can use over and over again, just repurposing. And now this one is kind of an interior scene, but really, really close up. So we've got the table in front, and you can see there's the front edge of the table like this. We can see the vertical like that if we could see it all the way along, and coming down to this corner. And then we've got our little beer tankard with its froth on the top. We've got the guys doing whatever they're doing on the other side of the table. So the beer tankard on the front, this is effectively our ground line. It's the edge of the table between the characters and us. Then we've got them in the middle ground doing their thing. And then you can see there's also a kind of a sense of a bush or something behind them. This is obviously steam going up there. So, but there is a kind of a framing of them against the background. It's not just plain black. There's a sense that there's some sort of blurred elements behind them. So when it comes to tracing like this, always go in and look at what is the foreground. Okay, so here this guy is really close to us and he is the foreground. Here the table and the beer tankard is the foreground. The ground line in this one is the back edge of the table between us and the characters who are doing the action, and then we've got the background behind. In here, the ground line is that line behind him. We've got the flat area in front, and then we've got the overlapping various grounds of bushes behind. So just another way of looking at something like Asterix and Obelix, also a great place to look for backgrounds. They can be super detailed, but you can find these sort of ones which just give you things to add to your repertoire, ideas to take forward into your own scenes.